That's the thing about stories. They never really end, do they? We're still telling the same stories we've always told, just with different names, different faces.
I Am Legend is a horror classic written in the 1950s by Richard Matheson. Most people my age probably know this from the 2007 adaptation starring Will Smith, which was a pretty good movie. But what most people might not know is that there were actually two other movie adaptations of this story. One was the 1960s version starring Vincent Price called The Last Man on Earth, and the other was the 1970s version starring Charlton Heston called The Omega Man. And for no reason at all, I became very obsessed with this story and analyzing the three different movies. And today I want to answer the question of which of these three film adaptations most closely follows the source material, this book here. And then I'm going to also answer which is actually the best film. So, let's begin. First, let's talk about the setting. So the book takes place in California in the 1970s, the mid-late 1970s. Vincent Price is the last man on Earth. The virus that spread across the world, that happened in 1965, and the majority of the plot takes place 3 years after in 1968. They never say exactly where the story is supposed to be taking place in this movie, but I'm guessing it's supposed to be California, even though it doesn't really look like California. Next, we have Charlton Heston's The Omega Man. In this movie, the virus outbreak took place in 1975, and the majority of the plot takes place in 1977, 1978, a couple years after the virus outbreak. And the location is very explicitly in California. There's a bunch of cool opening shots of him driving around LA, and in this one scene where the bad guys tie him up, he's actually in Dodger Stadium, I believe. It's a big sports venue in California. Next, we have Will Smith's I Am Legend. This movie was released in 2007, and the majority of the plot takes place in 2012. Location-wise, this movie is very explicitly set in New York City, which kind of separates it from the others. I think it's kind of cool that you could tell the story in different locations and maintain the structure and the themes and all that. I'm going to give 2 points for time and location to Charlton Heston's The Omega Man for taking place in the 1970s in California, just like in the book. Next, let's go on to the main character. In the book, his name is Robert Neville. In Last Man on Earth, for no reason at all, they changed his last name. His first name is still Robert, some people call him Bob, but his last name is Morgan, so he's Robert Morgan. In Charlton Heston's The Omega Man, he is Robert Neville, but he's Colonel Robert Neville. He was in the Army. And in Will Smith's, he is also Robert Neville.
My name is Robert Neville.
We're going to give a point to The Omega Man and Will Smith's I Am Legend. Next, is the character a scientist? Well, interestingly enough, in the book, he is not a scientist, but in all three of the film adaptations, he is a scientist. In the book, he's just some average Joe, just a factory worker. Doesn't know anything about science. After the world ended, he had to teach himself about the mechanics and the biology of the virus and how it spread and how it infected people and how to defeat it. So as far as his profession goes, I am not going to give a point to any of these three movies because he was not a scientist in the original book. Next, does he hunt the monsters down by day? Yes, in the book and in all three versions of the movie, he hunts the monsters down by day, finds the monsters, kills them to try and weaken their numbers. It's very explicitly shown in the movies where he's checking off areas on the map, just like it was done in the book. So, point goes to all three movies for that. Next category about the main character is why is he immune to the virus? Why did he not get affected by the outbreak? The line from the Vincent Price movie is basically exactly how it's done in the book.
Or perhaps it's because a long time ago when I worked in Panama, I was bitten in my sleep by a bat.
And that gave him some kind of immunity to the virus. We don't know for sure, but that's what he suspects. Now, the other two movies, in The Omega Man, he already had a vaccine that could make him immune to the virus. And in the burning rubble of the helicopter, Charlton Heston injects himself with the vaccine, thereby making himself immune. And in Will Smith's I Am Legend, he just is immune.
Less a 1% immunity. It left 12 million healthy people like you, me, and Ethan.
So some people are just immune in his version. So a point goes to the last man on Earth for his reason for being immune to the virus. Next category for the main character, I'm calling depression, isolation, loneliness, and alcoholism. Or as I like to call it, a typical Monday night. In the book, The main character, Robert Neville, was very clearly depressed. He was isolated, he was lonely, and he drank like a fish, which is understandable given his circumstances. In fact, it was actually kind of sad at times. A lot of the book was very emotional, and often he questioned why he kept trying. He's like, why even go on living? And sometimes he didn't have an answer. So he found that answer by drinking. There were many scenes where he would try something, fail, and then he would just throw a temper tantrum, in a sense. He would just smash his bottle against the wall. He'd just lay on the floor crying. There's one part where he's like, I stayed drunk for the next 3 days. You feel bad for the guy. You really do. And in a way, I think it's kind of realistic. I mean, being the last man on Earth is going to have some psychological effects on him. Now, let's look at the movies, how they deal with his depression and isolation and alcoholism and all that. In the Vincent Price movie, I'll give a point to that. They don't touch on it too much, but they do show it. Here we see him drinking. The bottle is like more than half drank, so yeah, he's getting drunk. As far as his loneliness and his depression go, I'm just going to play this clip here because I think this is some of the best acting from Vincent Price that I've seen. Might be a little overacting, but still, like, really gets you in the mindset of this character. So in the Will Smith movie, his character, Robert Neville, we really see the psychological struggles of this character. In fact, I think it's most closely related to the book with how intense his loneliness and fear and isolation and depression is. And I gotta give it to Will Smith. His acting in this movie is incredible.
Every single person that you or I has ever known is dead! Dead!
Please say hello to me. Please say hello to me.
And then we have Charlton Heston's The Omega Man. This version of Robert Neville does not seem to be affected by being the last man on Earth at all. He's just got this really nice apartment and stereo system, and he's just living this like great 1970s bachelor pad kind of life. He doesn't seem to mind being by himself at all, which I think is kind of hilarious. So as far as his inner psychological struggles go, I'm going to give a point to Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend. Next category for the main character. Does he invent a cure for the virus? Well, in the book, he does not. In each version of the movie, for the dramatic purposes of a film, they make him invent a cure. You know, the cure's a little different, how he invents it, whatever, but in each version, he does, in fact, invent a cure of some kind.
The antibodies in my blood worked. My blood has saved you, Ruth. Do you know what this means? You and I can save all the others.
It works! It works! It works! It works!
It's working.
So as far as the inventing of a vaccine cure for the virus, I cannot give a point to any of these movies. So the next category is visions of his family. Does he have some kind of hallucination of his wife and his daughter who he had before the outbreak, who were both lost to the virus? In the book, he's talking to someone. He wakes up, he looks at her, and he does not see the lady, but he sees his wife in her place. He has this hallucination of seeing his wife. The only movie to really portray that, like it's done in the book, is Will Smith's I Am Legend, and he's walking into the kitchen, and they're making breakfast, and at first he sees his wife and child. Cuts back, and it's the other two people. The other two movies do not have a scene like that, so I give a point to I Am Legend for that. Next category is, does the main character have flashbacks about his life with his family before the virus outbreak? In the book, yes, he does. In The Last Man on Earth, he also does. In Will Smith's I Am Legend, he also does, and it's a lot more tragic than Last Man on Earth. And in Charlton Heston's version, no, he doesn't. He's also just having a great time being himself. He doesn't really reflect too much on the previous world. He's just happy being Charlton Heston. Next, let's talk about the antagonists in the movie, the monsters. Are they vampires or not? In the book, Yes, they are vampires. They're very explicitly vampires. He wards them off with, mirrors and crosses and cloves of garlic, and he kills them by driving stakes into them. Very typical vampires. The Last Man on Earth follows the book most closely in that sense because, well, they're vampires.
You'd prefer us to believe in vampires?
If they exist, yes. There are stories being told, Bob.
By people who are out of their minds with fear.
Why can't they stand the sunlight? Why are they only seen at night?
Goes about gathering cloves of garlic to put around his house. He goes about getting new mirrors to ward the vampires off once his old ones are broken. Typical vampire stuff, just like in the book. In Charlton Heston's The Omega Man, I have no idea what the hell these things are. They're just like this gang of albinos who wear these black hoods and sunglasses.
You are discarded. You are the refuse of the past.
You're full of crap.
They're very well organized. It's not like their mental faculties are diminished because of the virus or anything. They're basically just a gang of albinos who are trying to kill him, which I think is hilarious. And finally, in I Am Legend, they are not vampires.
The other 588 million turned into your dark seekers. And then they got hungry. And they killed and fed on everybody.
They call them the Dark Seekers because they, seek the dark. They only come out at dark. They hide during the daytime. But it's not really said if they're vampires or zombies or what. They do come across as more generic Hollywood infected monster things. So as far as the nature of the monsters go, I'm going to give a point to Last Man on Earth. How did the virus spread? Well, in Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth, the way they talk about the virus spreading being a cloud of a virus, that's more or less exactly how it happens in the book. In the book, they specifically say it was dust storms that were carrying the bacteria or whatever it was around. And this, they say it's clouds or storms or something. So that's the most closely wet, the book. They get a point for that, yeah.
An unknown germ is being blown around the world. It's highly contagious and it's reached plague proportions.
And you don't believe some of the dead have come back?
In the Omega Man, they only mention it very briefly. There were missiles that carried biological warfare that turned people into albinos, apparently.
Abort firings. Interception will fragment bacilli carrying missiles. Repeat. Abort firings. Abort firings. Interception will fragment bacilli carrying missiles.
In I Am Legend, the very beginning of the movie shows a TV news clip where they're interviewing a scientist who claims she has invented the cure for cancer by modifying the measles vaccine.
So you have actually cured cancer?
Yes. Yes, we have.
She effed up. Next category is how to kill the monsters. How does Robert Neville defeat the monsters? In the book, like I mentioned, they are vampires. Robert Neville kills them in the typical vampire way by driving stakes into them. Although not specifically their heart, he found you can put a stake pretty much anywhere into them as long as it creates a hole in their flesh deep enough that it allows oxygen to get in and infect the blood because that's what eventually kills the virus inside of them. Whatever. That's basically how it happens in Vincent Price's movie, so he gets a point for that. And in the Omega Man and in Will Smith's movie, both of these are killed through conventional methods. Guns, explosions, what you would use to kill any human, I suppose. Next category is the burning pit. In the book, there was a big pit, a big bonfire. They just had this giant pit that was constantly on fire, and they would just dump truckloads of corpses into them. The only movie to show the burning pit was Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth, so that gets a point, and it's just about as grim as it was in the book.
I said get out! I want my daughter. Mister, a lot of daughters are in there, including my own.
Next category is monster leader. Was there some kind of monster that was commanding the others? In the book, there was not. Last Man on Earth, there was also not. They just kind of come across as a bunch of random drunk people being belligerent. In the Omega Man, yes, there was very clearly a leader to these hooded albino people, and it was this guy, Jonathan Matthias. What a name.
Take him to the little room for the questioning.
In I Am Legend, I'm going to say no, but yes, because there's this guy here. He's not the leader of all of the monsters. It's not like they have some big organization and they have some big overall objective. The reason this guy was leading the charge against Will Smith is because Will Smith stole or took or captured his monster wife or his partner, whatever, and was doing experiments on her in his basement, and really he just wanted to get his wife back. He was the one leading this charge against Will Smith. Next category is Ben Cortman. Haven't heard that name before? Well, because it only appears in the book and in Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth. Last Man on Earth gets a point for having Ben Cortman. In The Omega Man and in I Am Legend, this character is nowhere to be seen. Who was Ben Cortman? Ben Cortman was Robert Neville's best friend.
That's Ben Cortman. He was my friend.
Your friend?
He was like a kid brother. If I could find him and destroy him.
But you said he was your friend.
When I find him, I'll drive a stake through him just like all the others.
The next and last category directly related to the monsters is there a difference amongst those infected with the virus? There are two categories of individuals infected by the virus. One is the monsters, the vampires. The other category is people who are infected but aren't showing symptoms like those vampires that stalk them at nighttime. They're essentially like daywalker vampires. They're like half vampires. They have the virus, but they're not showing all the symptoms like the other really infected ones. So the only movie to get a point for this is The Last Man on Earth. Moving on from the villains of the movie, the next thing I'd like to talk about are the other characters in the story. So in the book, there is a dog, and the dog is very scared, and Robert Neville had to use a lot of patience and a lot of trial and error to entice the dog to come near him. He was just so happy to see another living creature. The tragedy of the dog in the book is that Robert Neville finds that the dog was in fact carrying the virus, and the next line is, it says, within 3 weeks the dog was dead. That's all we know. So the only movie to depict the dog character, just like it was done in the book, was Last Man on Earth. So Vincent Price finds this nice black fluffy dog, and he brings it inside.
You're going to get better. We're going to have lots of happy times together. You'll see, everything's going to be fine.
That's not exactly how it went in the book, but as far as the movies go, it's the closest, so it gets a point for that. The Omega Man does not feature a dog at all. Will Smith's I Am Legend has a dog. This is probably the best depiction of the dog. It differs a lot from the source material, but I like this dog. Who doesn't like this dog? He's a good boy. His name's Sam.
Here you go, just the way you like it. Disgusting. Nope. Eat your vegetables.
In what's one of the most tragic sequences in the movie, the dog sacrifices his own life to protect Will Smith from some of the rabid zombie dogs, gets the virus himself, starts to turn into one of the monsters, and Will Smith has to kill the dog, or else it's going to start to try and eat him. And that was a tearjerker, that scene. Next category is, besides Robert Neville, there is a woman character who plays a significant role in the story. In the book, the woman character's name is Ruth. Last Man on Earth gets a point because
My name is Ruth Collins.
In Omega Man, her name is Lisa, and in I Am Legend, her name is Anna. So they no points for them. How is the woman introduced? In the book, one day Robert Neville is out doing his scavenging for supplies or whatever, and he sees the woman in the distance, and he runs over, probably looking like a madman, saying, "Hey, wait, stop, come here." Guns after her and has to grab her and bring her back to his house. This point goes once again to Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth.
Wait, I'm not gonna hurt you, can't you understand? Wait!
He is just going nuts because he hasn't seen another real human in years at this point. So he starts chasing after her, she thinks he's some madman, she starts running, and he has to chase her down to talk to her. In I Am Legend, there is a woman character and a young boy that accompanies her, and they're introduced because they save Will Smith's character when he's making a last stand against the monsters, because after his dog dies, he's just kind of planning on fighting to the death, and they come in at the last moment and save him. And I saved this one for last because I think it's the funniest. In Charlton Heston's The Omega Man, he meets the female character Lisa because he is walking through a department store amongst all these other mannequins, and the character Lisa tries to disguise herself by hiding in plain sight, posing as one of the mannequins, and he's like, "What? Is that a person? What is this?" She glances over at him and then runs away. So the next category is a key thing about the female character is, does she betray Robert Neville? There's a big twist. I don't want to go into all the details, but in the book, yes, she's a traitor. She is a spy. The only movie to depict it pretty much exactly like it happened in the book is, of course, once again, Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth.
That's why I was sent here. To prevent you from resisting them. And supposed to keep you here. Until they come.
To kill me.
Yes.
Your new society sounds charming.
So it should be no surprise by now that Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth follows the source material most closely.
You're freaks. I'm a man. The last man.
However, I don't think it's the best film. It's not a bad movie. I don't think any of these movies are bad. They all have their own merit. They all have their own quirks and character. But if I were to say which of these movies is the best standalone film, regardless of accuracy to the source material, I'm giving that to Will Smith's I Am Legend. The weight of the story, the fact that a virus has destroyed all of civilization, killed 99.9% of humans, is taken the most seriously. The monsters, they seem like they pose an actual threat. I Am Legend also treats the inner psychological struggles of Robert Neville, again, most seriously. Being the last person on Earth would kind of drive someone crazy. He feels like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Look, I can save you. I can help you. You are sick, and I can help you. I can fix this. I can save everybody.
Will Smith's movie is the best film. And Vincent Price's Last Man on Earth is just not the best movie. It's got this real 50s, 60s B-movie quality to it. I mean, I'll be honest, I laughed the first time I saw these monsters. They just come across like a bunch of drunk people. They're just like this ragtag group of idiots stumbling around. The Ben Cortman character really sounds like Homer Simpson, and that was honestly kind of distracting for me.
Morgan, come out. Come out.
Omega Man, this movie is like a weird fever dream. I mean, they're not even monsters. They're these albinos with aviator shades on. It's also like the most 70s movie I've ever seen. Like, he lives in this swanky 70s bachelor pad. He wears these elaborate suits. He plays the 70s elevator music. The character Lisa has his 70s afro. So that kind of does it for the main plot points and characters in this story. Now we just want to do a couple of quick, fun, random little miscellaneous details that are in versions of the movies. So I think it's kind of cool that in the Omega Man, this is the first movie where we see mannequins, and he kind of treats them or talks to them as real people because he's lonely. And Will Smith's movie does that, and I'm guessing it's kind of as a reference to the Charlton Heston movie. What music does Robert Neville like? In the book, it's very explicitly said that he likes classical music. He has a nice record collection of all kinds of different classical composers. Interestingly, none of the movies show him liking classical music. In Last Man on Earth, he seems to like big band swing music. In The Omega Man, he has the 70s elevator music playing on his stereo system.
Well, my move.
In I Am Legend, Will Smith really likes Bob Marley. It plays a big role for his character. His daughter was named Marley.
That feels good.
Actually, speaking of music, another interesting thing about the Omega Man is that there's this scene where Charlton Heston goes to the movie theater and then watches the Woodstock movie, the documentary depicting the famous concert. And I guess he's seen it over and over and over because he's quoting the whole movie to himself there in the theater. And just thought it was interesting.
If we can't all live together and be happy,
If you have to be afraid to walk out
the street,
if you have to be afraid to smile at somebody,
right?
what
What kind of a way is that to go through this life?
Next category I want to mention is the Jesus metaphor. Robert Neville is the main character. He's the protagonist. He tries to be the savior of the human race, kind of like Jesus, and the only movie to depict this most clearly is The Omega Man. There's a number of references to sacrificial savior metaphor in I Am Legend as well, but this is most explicitly done in The Omega Man. This pose Charlton Heston is making in this fountain where he's dead, the way his hands are extended and his legs are bent to one side, that's kind of like Jesus on the cross. So like, yeah, I get what you're going for here. Very clear. And the very last category I want to bring up, and this is the most important category. If you've learned anything from this video, this is the most important thing. Is Shrek in the movie? In the book, no. Shrek is nowhere to be found. In Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth, not a reference to Shrek, not one.
Don't cry.
In The Omega Man, again, Shrek is nowhere to be found. However, in Will Smith's I Am Legend, we have Shrek.
Why don't you go celebrate your freedom with your own friends? But I don't have any friends. And I'm not going out there by myself. Hey, wait a minute, I got a great idea. I'll stick with you.
You a mean green fight machine.
That is all I have for today. If you've made it this far, thank you. I appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.